My heart stopped for a moment when I heard those words. It was an ordinary Tuesday, an ordinary evening. I was coming back from the kitchen with a cup of mint tea when the phone in the living room rang. Garrett quickly picked up the phone without even looking in my direction. His voice dropped to a whisper, and he walked out onto the terrace, closing the door behind him. A familiar scene. Just another business call, I used to think. I don't know what made me pick up the phone in my bedroom that night. Was it my sixth sense, a pent-up suspicion, or just a coincidence? In any case, I quietly picked up the phone and stood there holding my breath. At least 2 more weeks, maybe 3, Garrett said. No, she doesn't suspect anything. I felt my palm break out in a cold sweat as I clutched the phone tightly. Don't worry, she believes all my lies. My husband smiled into the phone. I could almost see that smug smile of his that I once thought was so charming. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, something about deadlines, numbers, and a meeting on Thursday. I put the phone down carefully, as if it might explode in my hands. My legs gave out, and I sat on the edge of the bed that Garrett and I had shared for the 10 years of our marriage. When he came back into the bedroom 20 minutes later, I was already under the covers with a book in my hands, the same one I'd been trying to read for the past 2 weeks without success. Rough day, Marin? He asked as he undid his tie. Always, I smiled, surprised at how I sounded so normal. Who was on the phone? Oh, it was Jim from accounting. Garrett waved his hand. There's trouble with the quarterly report again. It's nothing important. Jim from accounting, of course. I nodded and turned the page of the book I wasn't reading. I have to work late tomorrow, he added, taking off his shirt. Don't expect me back for dinner. Okay, I replied, watching the man I'd lived with for 10 years turn into a stranger before my eyes. That night I did not sleep. Garrett snored peacefully next to me, and I stared at the ceiling, searching my memory for the last months, years of our life together, looking for signs that I should have noticed earlier, business dinners that lasted late into the night, unexpected business trips that I found out about at the last minute, phone calls that he answered while leaving the room, passwords on all his devices, which he explained as corporate security. What else did I miss? I remembered our last vacation to the Bahamas 6 months ago. Garrett spent more time on his phone than with me on the beach. It's an important project, honey. You know that, he said, kissing the top of my head. And I did understand. I always understood. Or our attempt to have a child. 2 years of intense attempts, examinations, disappointments. I remember crying in the doctor's office when he said that the next step was to undergo expensive fertility treatment. We'll get the money together, don't worry, Garrett promised, hugging me. But every time I checked our joint account, the amount was less than I expected. Business expenses, darling. It'll all come back 100-fold, he would explain when I would ask cautiously. And now, she believes all my lies. At about 3 in the morning, I quietly got out of bed and went down to the kitchen. I turned on the kettle and took an old cup from the cupboard that my mother had given me. My mom never liked Garrett. His eyes run too much, Marin, she once said during one of our rare phone calls. I was offended and quickly changed the subject. My mother died 3 years ago, never making peace with my choice. Sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea in hand, I began to remember other red flags that I had ignored for years. How Garrett had gradually alienated me from my friends. How he always questioned my decisions as if I was incapable of making them on my own. How every year I withdrew more and more into myself so as not to cause his irritation. I opened my laptop and quietly logged into our joint email account, the only account he allowed me access to. The inbox was empty. No emails from Jim in accounting. I opened the banking app and looked at the latest transactions, a cash withdrawal, a payment at Blue Ocean, an expensive restaurant on the other side of town where Garrett and I had never been together. I walked into the guest bedroom and opened the closet where the boxes of documents were kept. I pulled out a folder with our tax returns from the last few years. The numbers didn't match what I knew about Garrett's salary. Where did the extra money come from? And most importantly, where was it going? Around 5 in the morning, I returned to our bedroom and watched my husband sleep. His face was relaxed, almost boyish. I used to find this feature charming. Now it seemed like a mask. Garrett Lovell, 39 years old, business consultant at the Bryan Consulting Group. My husband for 10 years. The man I married after giving up a promising job in New York to move to Portland with him. Don't worry, she believes all my lies. These words kept playing in my head like a broken record. Who was he kidding? Me, obviously. But in what way? Treason? Financial fraud? Something worse? I lay down next to him, trying not to wake him up. In an hour, the alarm clock would ring, and a new day would begin. A day that I would enter with open eyes. A plan began to form in my head. Not the impulsive, emotional outburst he might have expected from me if he'd known what I knew. No, I needed to act smart, cautiously, strategically. I remembered my younger brother Reed, with whom I had almost stopped talking in recent years. Another recommendation from Garrett. Reed worked at a law firm specializing in family law. He could have helped, but I couldn't just call him after years of silence. And then there was Ashley, my best friend from college. We had gradually lost touch after my wedding. Garrett thought she was too abrupt and a bad influence. Now I realized that he was just afraid of her insight. Ashley always saw through people. The alarm clock rang at 6:30. Garrett woke up, stretched, and turned to me with a sleepy smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Sleep well?" "Great," I lied, smiling back. "I had a nice dream." "Good." He patted my shoulder and got out of bed. I watched him walk to the bathroom, his confident gait of a man in control. A man who thinks I am so naive that I believe all his lies. But now the situation had changed. Now I knew that the game was not played by my rules, and I was ready to learn new ones. While the water was running in the shower, I picked up my phone and created a new email account with a password that Garrett would never guess. Then I opened a notebook and started making a list of things I needed to do. 1. Find all the financial documents. 2. Contact Reed. 3. Get back in touch with Ashley. 4. Open a separate bank account. 5. Find out who he was talking to last night. I heard the water turn off. I quickly tucked the notebook into my bag and struck a relaxed pose with my phone in my hands, as if I were watching the morning news. Garrett came out of the bathroom with a towel on his hips, drops of water dripping from his hair. This sight used to make my heart race. Now I felt only cold determination. "What do you have planned for today?" he asked as he dressed. "Just a normal day at work," I replied. "The deadline for the new issue is coming up, so there's going to be a lot of work." "Don't overwork yourself." He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "And don't expect me back for dinner, remember?" "Of course," I smiled. "Have a good day, darling." The door closed behind him, and I finally exhaled. I felt like I was playing a role in a play. The role of a trusting, loving wife. A role I had played flawlessly for 10 years. But today, a new performance was beginning, and I was no longer going to be an extra in my own life. At 9 o'clock sharp, I sat at my desk in the Portland Life magazine office, where I had worked for 8 years. The texts of the articles for the next issue were blurring before my eyes, and my brain refused to concentrate on my work. Garrett's words were haunting me. 10 years ago, I was a completely different person, a 27-year-old journalism graduate full of ambition and idealism. I had just received a job offer at a prestigious New York publication and was celebrating with friends at the Silver Horseshoe Bar. "You're too pretty to drink alone," he said, sitting down at the bar as my friends danced. "I'm not alone," I replied, pointing to the dance floor. "I think you're the loneliest person in this room." His penetrating gaze settled on me, and the most interesting. He was right. Despite my success, I felt insecure. Moving to New York scared me. My ambitions were fighting with my inner anxiety, and Garrett seemed to read my mind. Now, sitting at my desk, I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the photo album I kept in the office. Our wedding 6 months after we met. My happy eyes in the photos seemed naive now. We looked like a perfect couple. He was confident, successful, charming. I was young, in love, ready to follow him anywhere, even if it meant giving up my dream job. "Portland is a great place to start a family," Garrett convinced me. "I have prospects here, and you're talented. You can find a job anywhere." At the time, it seemed like a manifestation of care. Now I saw the first piece of the control puzzle. I flipped through the pages of the album and stopped at a birthday photo of Ashley, my best friend from college. In the picture, we were hugging, and Garrett stood a little to the side with a displeased expression on his face. "Your Ashley is too loud and intrusive," he said after the party. "And why did she have to bring up your old job in New York?" "She was just joking that I traded Manhattan for rainy Portland," I defended my friend. "She's trying to make you regret your choices about us." His voice turned icy. "It's manipulation, don't you see?" Gradually, our meetings with Ashley became less frequent. First, because of Garrett's urgent work issues, then because of his migraines when we invited her to our place. Eventually, we stopped communicating altogether. The same thing happened to my brother Reed. "He looks at me like I'm the thief who kidnapped his sister," Garrett complained after our dinner together. "He's always asking me about my work, as if I'm being interrogated." "He's just worried about me," I explained. "He's analytical. He's a lawyer." "That's why he's dangerous." Garrett put his hands on my shoulders. "Don't let him poison our happiness, Marin." I closed the photo album and took a deep breath. The sketch of the picture was becoming clearer and clearer. Step by step, year by year, Garrett distanced me from those who could see his influence on me, who could ask uncomfortable questions. The phone on my desk rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. "Marin, are you okay?" Deborah, my deputy, sounded concerned. "We've been waiting for you in a meeting for 10 minutes. "God, I'm sorry." I jumped up. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on my work. Graduation couldn't wait while I dealt with my marriage, but part of my brain kept analyzing, planning, looking for solutions. When I got home at 6, I knew I had a few hours of solitude, the perfect time to search. I started methodically, as I would for a journalistic investigation. First, the documents. I went through all the drawers, folders, and files. I got boxes from the garage. I laid everything out on the dining room table. Our tax returns for the last 5 years, bank statements, documents for the house, insurance policies. The numbers didn't add up. Garrett's official income as a consultant at Bryan Consulting Group was significant, but not enough for our lifestyle. Expensive watches, custom-made suits, regular business trips. All of this cost more than we could afford. And then I noticed it. Regular transfers from our joint account to a number marked only with the initials BK. The amounts ranged from $1,000 to $5,000 every month for the last 3 years. I opened my laptop and tried to log in to e-banking. The page required a login and password. Garrett had always handled our finances himself. "You've got a creative mind, honey. Leave those boring numbers to me," he said. I tried a few combinations. Our wedding date, his birthday, nothing. Then I remembered once seeing him type in something that looked like BCG and a few numbers. Bryan Consulting Group? I tried BCG with different combinations of digits until I got it. BCG 2010. the year he started working there. The full history of our transactions opened up before my eyes, and the picture was worse than I expected. The transfers to BK were just the tip of the iceberg. I saw cash withdrawals from ATMs in parts of the city we had never been to, payments at restaurants on days when Garrett was supposedly away on business, and worst of all, the gradual emptying of our joint investment account that we had opened for fertility treatment. There were supposed to be almost $40,000 there. My savings from bonuses, fees for freelance articles, even a small inheritance from my grandmother. Now there was less than $3,000 left. I closed my laptop and leaned back against the wall. My hopes for motherhood were melting away, along with the money in my account. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? The next step was his phone. Garrett never left it unattended, but this morning, as he was rushing to get ready for work, I noticed that he had forgotten his old phone in his bedside table drawer, the one he had used before he upgraded a few months ago. I found the charger and plugged it in. The screen lit up, demanding a PIN code. It was 4 digits. I tried the usual combinations: his birthday, the last 4 digits of his social security number. Nothing. Then I remembered our joke, how Garrett always reminded me of our wedding date. August 7th, Marin. Don't forget. As if I could forget. I entered 0807 and the phone unlocked. My heart was pounding as I started to look through his messages. Most of the contacts were labeled with only initials or numbers, but one name stood out completely: Wendy. I opened the message and felt a cold wave pass through my body. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Is Harrison away on a business trip? A message from Wendy, dated last year. Marin thinks I'm going to Seattle. We have 3 days, Garrett replied. The messages continued, becoming more intimate. Photos, meeting plans. I scrolled through them, feeling my fingers go numb. Who was Wendy? The name sounded familiar. I searched my memory and remembered the company Christmas party 2 years ago, the only one Garrett had taken me to. Wendy, a young financial analyst with a bright laugh and a daring neckline. Just a coworker, was how Garrett introduced her. But the betrayal, though painful, was only a symptom. I continued my search and found emails about a certain Project Omega. Discussion of interest, investment shares, confidentiality clauses, strange phrases about bypassing regulators and private channels. One of the emails caught my particular attention, from a certain Noah Welch, dated 4 months ago. Garrett, I can't be a part of this. What you and Davidson are doing with client investments is illegal. If we don't stop, I'm going to have to notify management. Garrett's response was short. You try that, and I'll make sure the blame falls on you. I have proof of your involvement from the beginning. Be smart, Noah. There's too much at stake here. I felt nauseous. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He seemed to be involved in some kind of financial fraud. He was threatening a colleague who wanted to get out of the scheme. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a car engine on the driveway. My heart jumped into my throat. Garrett was coming home much earlier than he had promised. I frantically started gathering up the papers I had laid out, turned off my old phone, and put it back in my nightstand. I closed the laptop just as the key turned in the lock. Marin? Garrett's voice echoed through the hallway. Are you home? In the kitchen, I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. I'm making dinner. I thought you'd be surprised, he said, coming into the kitchen and kissing me on the cheek. The meeting got canceled, so I decided to have dinner with my beautiful wife. His smile seemed sincere. His eyes looked with the same warmth as always. It's wonderful, I smiled back, feeling the muscles in my face tense. I've just started making pasta. It smells incredible. He hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. You know how much I love your pasta. I stirred the sauce, and my mind raced. The man holding me in his arms was a stranger, a man who had deceived me, betrayed me, maybe even broken the law. A man who had spent the money we had saved for our potential child. And while he was telling me about his day, about some trivial office gossip, I made a decision. I couldn't confront him directly, not now, when I didn't know the full picture and didn't have a plan of action. I needed help. I needed to find people I could trust. By the way, the bank called today, I said in passing, putting pasta on my plates. Something about updating the terms of my account. Garrett froze for a moment, but quickly resumed his casual smile. I'm surprised no one called me, he shrugged. Probably some kind of marketing. Of course, I nodded. I didn't. I know you always keep our finances under control. Dinner passed in the usual atmosphere. We discussed the latest news, weekend plans, and a new Netflix series. I laughed in the right places, asked the expected questions, like an actress who has studied her role to perfection. And inside me, determination grew. Tomorrow I will find my brother. I'll get back in touch with Ashley, and maybe I'll try to track down this Noah Welch. I needed to know exactly what my husband was involved in. That night, lying next to Garrett in bed, listening to his steady breathing, I looked up at the ceiling and thought about the $40,000 that had disappeared from our account, about my dream of becoming a mother, which was melting away with each passing day, about a woman named Wendy who received messages meant for her lover, and I no longer felt pain or confusion, only icy crystal clear rage that was turning into a plan. The next morning, I woke up with a clear understanding. I had to act immediately, but very carefully. Garrett was too observant not to notice the drastic changes in my behavior. I realized that every step I took had to be carefully considered. While Garrett was taking a shower, I quickly looked at his calendar on his phone. He was planning to stay late at work today because of some important meeting. The perfect time for my first move. Over breakfast, we exchanged everyday phrases. I kissed him goodbye with a smile that had already become part of my daily mask. When the door closed behind him, I finally exhaled. At 10 o'clock, I called the editorial office and told them that I was taking a sick leave. Then I got in the car and drove towards the city center, to the building where the Campbell and Partners law firm was located. It was there that my younger brother Reed had worked for the past 5 years. When was the last time I saw Reed? Probably at my mom's funeral 3 years ago. We exchanged a few awkward words, and then Garrett gently led me to my car, explaining that we shouldn't open the wounds. I parked in the underground parking lot and went up to the 7th floor. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. Can I help you? I'd like to see Reed Hartley. I'm his sister, Marin. Her eyes widened in slight surprise, and then she nodded and picked up the phone. A few minutes later, the office door opened and I saw Reed. My brother had changed. He had grown broader in the shoulders, his once short hair was now neatly combed back, and his face had subtle wrinkles. But his eyes, the same penetrating brown eyes, looked at me with a mixture of surprise and restrained joy. Marin? He froze in place, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Hi, Reed. My voice was quieter than I expected. Can we talk? He led me to his office, a small but cozy room overlooking the city. He offered me coffee, which I declined. We sat down across from each other, separated by a desk and years of silence. How are you? He finally asked. Honestly, I don't know, I answered, trying to find the words. Reed, I need your help. But first, I want to apologize for disappearing from your life. Garrett, it wasn't a question. Yes, I admitted, but the choice was mine, and I regret it every day. Reed leaned forward, his face softening. What happened, Marin? I didn't plan on telling him everything right away. I wanted to be careful, to be gradual, but something in the warmth of his gaze broke down my defenses. The words came pouring out. The overheard phone conversation, the missing money, evidence of infidelity, suspicious financial transactions. Do you have proof of these financial transactions? He asked when I was done. Some, I replied, but a lot of it is on his devices, which I have limited access to. You need more? Reed rubbed his chin. Bank statements, copies of tax returns, proof of transfers, anything you can find. Is it dangerous? He clarified. If Garrett is really involved in financial fraud, then yes, it could be dangerous. But the risk is greater if you stay with him without knowing the whole truth. We came up with a plan. Reed advised me to open a separate bank account in another bank and gradually transfer funds from my salary there. He also promised to gather information about the legal implications of Garrett's possible fraud. Marin, Reed stopped me as I was about to leave. You need more allies. Someone who understands finances better than I do. Ashley came to mind immediately. Right, he nodded. She's been working at Global Finance for the last few years, and, she's been asking about you a lot. Guilt tightened my throat. How much had I lost because of my blind loyalty to the man Garrett turned out to be? After having lunch with Reed at a small cafe near his office, I felt a strange relief. It was as if the heavy stone I had been carrying around inside had become a little lighter. I had an ally. I was no longer alone. The next step was Ashley. Finding her was easy. Her social media profile provided enough information. She was now a senior financial analyst at a large company. She was single, judging by the absence of a wedding ring in her photos. I sent her a message asking for a meeting, feeling my fingers shaking. The answer came almost instantly. Oh my God, Marin! Of course, today at 5 at the Green Corner? I knew the bar. It was far enough away from Garrett's and my neighborhood that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. At 5 o'clock, I was already sitting at a table in the corner, nervously twirling a glass of mineral water in my hands. When the door opened and Ashley walked in, I barely recognized her. The once chubby student with lush curly hair had turned into a fit woman with a short haircut and a penetrating gaze. Marin, she threw her arms around me, not even allowing me to stand up. We talked for almost 3 hours. At first, we were just catching up. She told me about her career, her recent divorce, and her travels. I shared the safe parts of my life, my work at the magazine, my hobbies, the books I had read. But gradually the conversation turned to the real reason for our meeting. And again, I told more than I had planned. It was always like that with Ashley. She knew how to listen, ask the right questions, and create an atmosphere of safety. That bastard, she filtered out when I finished my story. I always felt something was wrong with him, but even I couldn't imagine this. I need your help, Ashley, I said. I don't understand all these financial schemes. I don't know exactly what he's doing or how serious it is. I'll figure it out. She squeezed my hand. But I need to see the documents, the statements, everything you have. We agreed to meet in 2 days. Ashley also advised me to find this Noah Welch, an employee of Garrett's who seemed to be the only one who stood up to his machinations. If he really tried to stop Garrett, he could be a valuable source of information, she explained, and possibly a witness if this goes to trial. Court. The word hit me hard. Could it really be that serious? But deep down, I knew the answer. Garrett hadn't just deceived me in small ways. He had built our life together on a foundation of lies. The next day, I opened a bank account on the other side of town. I transferred most of my last freelance article fee there, money that Garrett didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Finding Noah Welch turned out to be more difficult than I expected. I decided to act directly. I called the company's receptionist, introducing myself as a potential client, and asked about the possibility of consulting with analyst Noah Welch. Unfortunately, Mr. Welch no longer works for our company. The receptionist replied, but I can put you in touch with another consultant. How long ago did he leave? I asked, trying to sound casual. About 3 months ago, she replied. Perhaps you would be interested in Mr. Lovell's advice. He oversaw most of Mr. Welch's projects, so Noah had left the company shortly after that letter threatening to expose the fraud. The answer came unexpectedly. That evening, while looking through Garrett's old phone, I found Noah's contact with an address. The next day, telling Garrett that I had a meeting at the newsroom, I went there. A man in his mid-40s, tall, with a tired face and attentive eyes, answered the door. Noah Welch? I asked, feeling my throat dry. Yes, he replied, watching me warily. How can I help you? My name is Marin Lovell, I said. I'm Garrett Lovell's wife. His face changed instantly. First shock, then suspicion, and then something like sympathy. Mrs. Lovell. He took a step back, letting me into the house. I think we have something to talk about. Noah turned out to be nothing like I imagined. Not the broken loser my husband had set up, but a calm, collected professional who had made a conscious choice to leave the company when he realized what was happening. I'd suspected something was wrong for almost a year, he said. The numbers didn't add up. Client funds were being diverted through a complex network of accounts. But I had no proof, just suspicions. Until we got to Project Omega, I added. Noah raised his eyebrows in surprise. You know about it? Only the name, I admitted, and that you wrote Garrett a letter threatening to expose the information. And you know what he said? That he would set you up. Noah smiled bitterly. He almost did. He falsified documents that indicated that I had initiated this scheme, but he didn't have enough time to finish the job. I had already submitted my resignation and copies of the real documents to the management, not enough to completely expose him, but enough to protect myself. What is Project Omega? I asked. An investor withdrawal scheme, Noah explained. Garrett and his partner, Davidson Clark, convinced clients to invest in non-existent, highly profitable projects. Part of the money was returned as income to maintain the illusion, and the rest was distributed among themselves. BK, I suddenly realized. The transfers to BK's account are Davidson Clark? Most likely, Noah nodded. Everything was done through shell companies and offshore accounts. I have some bank statements, I said, and my friend Ashley is a financial analyst. Maybe together we can reconstruct the whole picture. Noah looked at me for a long time, as if evaluating me. Why are you doing this, Mrs. Lovell? Gathering evidence against your own husband? I met his gaze. Because he didn't just steal the client's money, Mr. Welch. He stole 10 years of my life, and my dream of becoming a mother. He nodded silently. I'll help you, he said at last. But you have to understand the risks. Garrett is not the type to go down without a fight. I know, I replied. We exchanged contacts and arranged another meeting, this time with Ashley and Reed. The team began to take shape. On the way home, I felt strangely elated. In the week that had passed since the overheard phone call, I had taken more steps on my own than I had in years. I reconnected with my brother, got my best friend back, and found an ally in the fight against Garrett, and something inside me was waking up, something that had long been sleeping under a layer of fear, uncertainty, and familiar comfort, my true self, my strength. In the evening, when I got home, I opened my laptop and started looking for editorial jobs in other cities. Portland had become a prison for me, a beautiful, comfortable prison, but still a prison. I needed to find a new place where I could start over. When Garrett returned home, I greeted him with a smile, telling him about the fictional meeting in the newsroom. He listened, nodded, and told me about his day. His face was calm, confident, the face of a man in control. He did not realize that the ground under his feet had already begun to shift, and that I was no longer the same Marine who believed all his lies. The next 2 weeks passed like a fever. Ashley, Reed, and I met almost every day, carefully choosing places away from the city center. Noah brought copies of the documents he had managed to save before he was fired. Ashley analyzed financial reports, finding connections between transactions. Reed was consulting with a colleague who was a financial crime specialist without disclosing specific names. "This is serious, Marin," Ashley said as we gathered in a small conference room Reed had rented under the guise of a work meeting. "Garrett and Davidson Clark have withdrawn at least $2 million of investment over the past 3 years. And that's just what we can document," Noah added. "The real amount could be 3 times that." Reed spread out the legal documents he had prepared on the table. "These papers will protect your share of the community property," he explained. "But we have to act quickly and decisively. We can't give him a chance to hide the assets." "So, what's the next step?" I nodded, feeling my resolve building inside me. "An anonymous letter to the management of Bryan Consulting Group and the IRS," Ashley suggested, "with copies of the documents, but no attribution." "That will trigger an internal investigation," Noah nodded. "And when Garrett feels like the ground is burning under his feet, he'll start making mistakes." The next day, Reed sent 2 envelopes of documents, one to the company's headquarters and one to the IRS. I felt strangely relieved, as if I had passed the baton to someone else. Now I just had to wait. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Garrett came home earlier than usual. His face was tense. His eyes were distracted. "Is everything okay?" I asked, showing concern. "Yeah, just tired," he replied, pouring himself a whiskey. "There's some kind of fuss in the company. An internal audit or something." "Sounds serious." I continued to chop vegetables for the salad, trying to keep my voice casual. "Nonsense." He waved his hand, but I noticed his fingers trembling as he raised the glass to his lips. Over the next few days, Garrett became irritable, often staying late at work, and when he returned, he immediately locked himself in his office. One night, I woke up to the sound of his voice arguing with someone on the phone. "I can't transfer the entire amount right now," he hissed. "Give me a week." "No, you don't understand. They check every transaction." "Yes, I know we need to act fast." The next morning, I called Reed. "He's starting to panic," I said. "I think he's trying to get the money out." "We're ready," my brother replied. "The documents to freeze the joint accounts have been submitted. From now on, he can only use what is in his personal account." That evening, the first serious fight took place. Garrett burst into the kitchen waving his smartphone. "Do you know anything about this?" He shoved the screen in my face. "There was a message from the bank about restricting access to the joint account." "What?" I feigned surprise. "No, I didn't do anything with our accounts." "That's strange." He looked at me suspiciously. "Maybe it's a mistake," I suggested. "Tomorrow you can call the bank and sort it out." He continued to stare at me, but finally nodded. "Of course." It was a mistake, but I knew he didn't believe me, and he knew I knew. For the next few days, we circled each other like two boxers before the final round. Garrett became overly attentive, asking about my day, my plans, asking me to have dinner at a restaurant. I agreed, smiled, and kept the conversation going. The game went on, and behind the scenes of this play, a real drama was unfolding. We learned from Noah that a large-scale investigation had begun in the company. External auditors were involved. Garrett and Davidson Clark were summoned to a series of meetings with the management. The IRS also started an audit. On the 10th day after the anonymous letters were sent, Garrett returned home in the middle of the day. I was working in the living room on a magazine article and looked up in surprise when the door opened. Is something wrong? He looked terrible pale face, shirt collar open, unfocused eyes. I need your help, Marin, he said, sitting down next to me on the couch. I closed the laptop, feeling every muscle in my body tense. A minor misunderstanding with the financial documents. He tried to smile, but only a grimace came out. Nothing serious, but temporarily all my accounts are frozen. We need to re-register the house in your name to protect it from corporate lawyers. Re-register the house? I repeated. Just a precautionary measure? He took my hands in his. You trust me, don't you, Marin? His palms were cold and wet. Of course, I said, but I need to know more. What exactly happened? Nothing much. He abruptly released my hands and stood up. Bureaucrats found formal discrepancies and made a scandal out of it. What about Project Omega? I asked, looking him straight in the eye. Is that a formal discrepancy as well? Garrett froze. A second, two, three. Then he slowly turned to me. Where did you hear about this? His voice became low, almost threatening. More importantly, I know about it. I stood up, feeling strangely calm. About the investors' money that you and Davidson Clark embezzled. About the forged documents. The threats against Noah Welch. He staggered as if he'd been hit. You talked to Noah? I wasn't spying on you, Garrett, I replied. I just stopped turning a blind eye to your lies. What lies? He tried to laugh, but it came out hoarse. You don't know what you're talking about. Really? I went to the bookcase and pulled out a file folder. Or about the Blue Ocean restaurant where you had lunch with Wendy on the days you were supposedly on a business trip. His face changed. The mask of a confident, loving man finally fell away, revealing the real Garrett, a cold, calculating manipulator. You don't know what you're getting yourself into, he said. This isn't child's play, Marin. Oh, I do, I nodded, and neither does the IRS and the management of the Bryan Consulting Group. It was you, he suddenly realized. You sent the documents. It doesn't matter. I remained calm, although my heart was pounding like crazy. What matters is that your fraud has been exposed, and that our joint account, which you emptied, is now protected by the court. Protected? He smiled faintly. Did your lawyer brother help you? Or maybe your fat girlfriend, Ashley? Just like you did with Noah Welch to set him up, I retorted. I guess we have more in common than I thought. He took a step toward me, and I involuntarily stepped back. His eyes darkened. You don't realize what you've done. Davidson is not someone to be trifled with. If they think I betrayed them, that's not my problem, Garrett, I interrupted, and neither are the fake IDs you've been forging for years. For us, he suddenly exclaimed. Everything I did was for our future. Do you think an editor's salary could have paid for this house, these vacations, your designer dresses, and the money for fertility treatment? I felt my voice tremble. The $40,000 you took from our joint account, was that also for our future? He looked away for a moment. It was a hard time. I had to patch holes in one of my projects. Of course, I smiled bitterly. Like all your lies. Don't you dare judge me, he hissed. You've lived like a fairy tale all these years, enjoying your blessings without asking where they came from, and now you've decided to become a moral compass? No, Garrett, I shook my head. I've decided to stop being a victim, to stop being the woman who believes all your lies. He froze, his eyes widening. What did you say? Don't worry, she believes all my lies, I quoted. Isn't that what you said to your friend Davidson that night? When you thought I couldn't hear you? Garrett sat down on the couch, as if his legs no longer held him up. You were eavesdropping. By accident, I admitted, but it opened my eyes. And you know what? I'm grateful for it, because otherwise I would have lived your lies. hoping to be a mother someday, not realizing that you were using my dreams to manipulate me. I loved you, he said quietly. In your own way, but I did. Maybe, I nodded, but that doesn't excuse what you did. To our marriage, with my trust, with the investor's money. He suddenly stood up and walked over to me. His face changed, became determined. You will sign the documents for the house, he said, right now, and then we'll go to the bank together and lift the restrictions on the accounts. No, I answered firmly. That's not gonna happen. You don't understand your situation. He grabbed my shoulders. I'm not joking, Marin. If you don't help me now, I won't be able to get the money back to Davidson. Let me go, I said calmly. You're making it worse. You made me do it, he said, squeezing my shoulders tighter. You're the one who ruined everything. No, Garrett. I looked him straight in the eye. With your greed, your lies, your betrayal. We stood there face to face, and I could see the emotions changing in his eyes. Anger, fear, despair. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Who is it? He asked sharply, not letting go of me. It must be Reed, I answered, in case our conversation went like this. The phone rang again. Garrett slowly unclenched his fingers. It's not over yet, he said. It is for me, I replied, and went to open the door. Reed stood on the doorstep with two police officers. Mrs. Lovell, one of the officers said, we received a call about a possible threat of violence at this address. It's okay, I answered, feeling a heavy weight lifted from my shoulders for the first time in days. I looked around. Garrett stood in the middle of the living room, fists clenched. His face, once so appealing to me, now seemed alien, a mask of a man I had never really known. It's not over, Marin, he repeated. It is for me, I said again, and let Reed take my hand. Seattle greeted me with rain, not like the rain in Portland. Here, the rain was violent, energetic, as if it was washing away the past rather than blurring it into a shapeless mass. It had been exactly 1 year since I signed the last divorce papers and left my previous life behind. I stood by the panoramic window of my 15th floor apartment, watching the raindrops run down the glass, turning the city lights into blurry spots. A cup of hot green tea warmed his palms. An open laptop with an unfinished editorial for the new issue of the Northwest Review, the literary journal I became editor-in-chief of 3 months ago, was waiting on my desk. The phone vibrated. Ashley. Hi, editor. Her energetic voice filled the apartment. Are you ready for your meeting tomorrow? As ready as I can be, I replied, feeling the familiar flutter in my stomach. The doctor said all the tests are normal. Of course they are, Ashley laughed. You're my healthiest friend, running every morning even in the rain. I smiled. Tomorrow was my first consultation for the in vitro fertilization procedure. The dream of becoming a mother, which Garrett had used to manipulate me for so long, was now completely in my hands. Reed and Lauren want to fly in next weekend. Ashley changed the subject. He says he has some updates on the case to discuss. Really? I automatically looked at the folder in the corner of my desk, where I kept all the documents related to the trial against Garrett. Don't worry, it's nothing negative, Ashley quickly added. But he wants to discuss it in person. Lauren, Reed's new wife, was a surprisingly warm woman who immediately accepted me as a sister. Their wedding 7 months ago was one of the happiest days of my new life. When we finished talking, I went back to my laptop to finish the column. Working at the magazine was more fulfilling than it had ever been in Portland. Here I had the freedom to shape the publication, choose the authors, and influence the cultural life of the city. The phone vibrated again, this time with a message from Noah. Coffee tomorrow after your meeting. Good luck. Noah Welch. A man who unexpectedly came back into my life 3 months ago when I saw him at our magazine's literary evening. I was shocked to find out that he had also moved to Seattle, taking a job as CFO at a publishing house that, among other things, published our magazine. I'd love that, thank you, I replied, feeling a slight warmth inside. Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously, from formal conversations about work to real friendship. So far, no romance, although sometimes I caught his eyes full of something more than just friendly sympathy. And, to be honest, sometimes I reciprocated. But I was in no hurry. My past experience had taught me to value my independence and trust my own voice, and Noah seemed to understand this better than anyone else. The next morning, on my way back from the clinic, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: fear, hope, excitement. The doctor explained the whole process, broke it down into stages, and discussed possible risks. In 2 weeks, I was to start hormone therapy to stimulate my ovaries. The idea that I could get pregnant in a few months seemed both incredible and completely natural. Noah was waiting for me in a small, cozy coffee shop not far from the clinic. He waved when he saw me, and I couldn't help but notice how he had changed in a year. His tense features had softened, and his brown eyes were calm. "You've changed, he said, looking at me closely. "When you first came to me in Portland, there was fear in your eyes. Now it's gone." I was a little surprised to see that. "Really? Maybe you're right." "Of what?" he asked, handing me a cup of cappuccino. "Maybe of being alone, or that I'll make the wrong decision, or that someone will think I'm stupid, naive, weak." "You've never been weak," Noah said. "On the contrary, it took incredible strength to do what you did." I smiled. Noah always had a way of saying something that hit the nail on the head. "How's the company doing?" I changed the subject. "Much better than Bryan Consulting Group," he hummed. "Did you hear the latest news? Davidson Clark has agreed to a deal with the investigation. He turned in everyone involved, including Garrett, in exchange for a reduced sentence." I felt a strange emptiness inside. Not pain, not anger, not satisfaction, just emptiness, as if someone was talking about a person I'd never known. "How long is he facing?" I asked, more out of curiosity than any other feeling. "Preliminary estimates are 5 to 7 years," Noah replied, "but the case will continue. Your brother knows more details, I'm sure." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. It would be a lie to say that I didn't care about Garrett's fate. But that concern was similar to what you feel when you read about a stranger's misfortune in the news, compassion mixed with relief that it wasn't happening to you. A few months after moving to Seattle, I started writing my memoir. Not just the story of my marriage to Garrett, but a broader story about self-discovery, accepting my own strength, and rebuilding my life. I didn't know if I would ever publish this text, but the writing process itself was therapeutic. 2 days later, Reed and Lauren arrived. They stayed in a hotel near my apartment, and we had a cozy dinner at my place. Ashley came too. She'd moved to Seattle a few months after I did, taking a position at one of the city's top financial firms. "So, news." Reed put down his fork and looked at Lauren. "We've made a tentative agreement on your compensation in the Garrett case." I froze with my wine glass in my hand. "Compensation?" "Yes," Reed nodded. "The funds withdrawn from your joint account, including the money set aside for fertility treatment, plus non-pecuniary damages. The total amount is $120,000. I put the glass on the table. "And what do I have to do to get this?" Reed shrugged. "Just sign a few documents." "What about Garrett?" I asked. "Do I have to meet with him?" "No," my brother shook his head. "The deal was made through his lawyer. I think he's hoping that it will mitigate the criminal sentence, show that he's remorseful and making amends." I took a deep breath. $120,000. more than enough to pay for the IVF procedure, to create a financial airbag for the child I hope to have. It's kind of ironic, I said quietly. The money he took to finance his fraud is now coming back to help me become a mother on my own. Poetic justice, Ashley agreed, raising her glass. We toasted, and the conversation moved on to other topics. Lauren's work at an environmental organization, Ashley's new project, Reed's plans to open his own law practice. I sat among these people who had become my real family and felt deeply grateful. The next week, I went with Noah to the first performance of the theater festival, then to the second, and the third. After the last one, we walked around the city at night for a long time, talking about everything: literature, finance, politics, art. He told me about his family in Minnesota, and I told him about my childhood with Reed and our parents. When he walked me to the door of the apartment, we had that special silence that happens before something important. Those were wonderful evenings, Noah said, looking at me warmly. Thank you for sharing them with me. Thank you too, I replied. Next time, he began cautiously, maybe we could be not just friends. I looked at him and saw not Garrett, not a ghost of the past, but the man who stood in front of me now. Honest, open, patient. Maybe, I said, but let's not rush. We have time. He smiled and nodded. Good night, Marin. Good night, Noah. I entered the apartment and closed the door. I didn't invite him in, not yet, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that true intimacy takes time, trust, and most importantly, a clear understanding of one's own desires. I was no longer that Marin who believed all the lies of her husband. I was no longer a naive, insecure woman who measured her own value through the approval of others. The scars of the past will never disappear completely. I learned not to hide them, but to accept them as part of my history. The story of a woman who lost herself but found herself again. A woman who fell but got back up stronger. I walked to the window and looked at my rain-blurred reflection. Expressive eyes, confident posture, a slight smile on my lips. A new version of me, not perfect, not complete, but real and free.